Hello. Good morning. Little louder. Well, I just want to say thank you all for coming to the summit. I know some of you traveled pretty far. I heard some New York, some Boston, some Philly, Orange County. So thank you so much for coming from all over LA and the United States to be here. It's just so wonderful to see this community together. It is a weird time, and to see all of you in one room, it just like really fills my heart. So thank you so much. Slide. So I kind of want to be like, how many of you have been to one of our events before? Any of it, programming, any of it. Okay, how many people is the first time? Oh my gosh, I love it. Well, please mingle, meet each other. We really need to build this community, and it all starts with all of us here. So welcome to our Breaking Barriers Summit. I'm Bernice Chao. I'm the founder of Asians in Advertising, and I'm really excited that we're all here together. We started Asians in Advertising with one really simple idea, that everyone deserves to be seen. And I mean everyone. They should be seen, heard, and valued within this industry. And what began as a belief has really grown into what I call now a movement of all of us. And today, this room is really a living proof of that. This summit is a celebration of community, courage, and all of us rising together. And Breaking Barriers isn't just a title, it's really what we want to do. So we recognize those challenges, and we really want to meet them head on together. You are not alone. We are all here with you in this room, and you're going to hear from incredible leaders. You're going to hear from creatives and change makers who will really inspire you. But first, I want to do a huge thank you to our amazing sponsors. Please thank you for really making today special and possible. If you see anyone with a gold sticker, like a star, please give them an extra thank you, because we really need them for this community. So we're really grateful. What you do really means the world to us. And a huge, incredible shout out to Snap. This place is gorgeous. You are so generous for hosting us for this event, for the space, the food, and really just the opportunity for all of us to be here together. So to kick things off, I'm really excited to introduce Frank Lee. He's the global head of industry at independent agencies at Snap, to the stage for a few words as our title sponsor.
Hi, everybody. My name is Frank Lee, and I'm on the agency team here at Snap. I'm really excited about today. Really thankful that you guys are all here. Before we get started, I would like to share a little bit about myself. So next week, I turn 50 years old. Which is just crazy, because that just basically means I'm the same age as the internet. But the internet keeps getting upgraded over and over again, and this guy doesn't. And I've been in this industry for 25 years, and only now am I finally comfortable in my own skin. Right? I see some nodding heads. And the journey hasn't always been easy. I've had a lot of ups and downs, and my biggest challenge through it all, my toughest adversary, had always been my own inner voice, right? Now, looking around this room, I can't help but say to myself, man, like I really wish I had something like this when I was younger. This community, this groundswell of Asian American strength and solidarity. It really would have been helpful, especially during those low points in my life. And so I'm really thankful. Now, actually, switching gears, I was very fortunate and blessed to have a lot of really good mentors in my life, and they added a ton of value. And every time I asked them, like, how do I return the favor? How do I pay you back? They all said the same thing. They said, Frank, pay it forward. Take care of the next generation. And so I'm really, really proud to be here today, to be a part of this community, to be part of this organization that's helping build the next generation of leaders. And I think it's fair to say that If all of our parents came into these doors right now, they'd be super proud because we stand on their shoulders, right? And so thank you guys all for joining us. Before I do walk off, I do want to share one quick video. So some of you guys may know Grace Chao recently joined as Chief Marketing Officer at Snap. And she really, really wanted to be here, but she just had a conflict she couldn't get out of. But she did want to share a nice message. So check it out.
Hi, everyone. I'm Grace Chao, CMO of Snap Inc. It is truly an honor to welcome Asians in advertising, our community, into our headquarters today. A special shout out to Bernice for planning this amazing event that brings together our community as well as our allies. I know how very hard it is to be seen, heard, and understood. And the fact that we have this summit that brings everyone together is so truly special to me. I'm so sorry I can't be there in person today, but wanted to make sure I send some love. I can't wait to see everybody at our next event. I hope all of you have a great day together.
Dude, she's such a badass. All right, I'm gonna walk off now, and I think Bernice is gonna come back and get the programming going. So thank you all.
Hello again. So, I want to say just a couple words here, including our schedule. It's on the website, so you have it on your phone. We have a picture here if you want to take a picture of it. We have incredible speakers throughout today. We have some fun things that are happening at lunch. We heard you all wanted to network even more, so we dedicated a whole hour to networking. So those cute little star stickers, they do something. So stay tuned for that. We have prizing, we have raffles. There's some more surprises. So lots to do, lots to come today. Again, thank you so much to our sponsors. I just want to stay here and kind of give a shout out to all of them individually for what they've contributed. So Snap, of course, Magnite, Giant Spoon, Paramount, Cargo, IWG, IW Group, Rosie, Monterey Bay Aquarium, Mullenlow, Amplify, Encore, and Double Verify. We have a special offsite happy hour. So if you want to keep networking, we are so grateful to have Double Verify have an offsite at Teatro today. We are also grateful for our partners. We have not only headshots, we have raffling that you saw outside. We also have special goodies in your goodie bags from our partners and throughout. So you'll see lots of goodies from our partners. So really grateful to have them as part of today. And of course, shout out to our incredible board and our volunteers who work tirelessly behind the scenes. We are, I would say, small but mighty as a nonprofit. So if you are a volunteer or part of the board, could you please stand so we can say thank you? They're wearing the blue lanyards. I know some are outside as well, but they work so hard throughout the entire year, and some volunteers for the last 4 years for this organization. And so we are so grateful for the people who really do make this happen. So let's keep the momentum going. Please join me in welcoming to the stage Ziad Ahmed, head of Next Gen at UTA and founder of ZCON. After the keynote, we're going to be following by a powerful fireside with Christina Liu, who is the Senior Vice President of Strategy at Carrot. So let's please give them a warm welcome.
Hi, friends. Good morning. How are we doing? How are we feeling? Feeling okay? Well, thank you guys so much for being here this morning, and thank you for spending some time with me. And thank you, Bernice and the whole team, Christina, for having me and inviting me in for this keynote and for being part of this amazing, tremendous community and what it means to this industry and I think what it means to each of us. I'm going to tell you guys a little bit today about my story and how I ended up here in front of you. And then we're going to have a bit of a fireside chat with Christina, and then we're going to open it up to questions, as I'm hopeful that this is going to be as conversational as possible. But what I'm really here today to talk about is really two things, right? One, it is no secret to anybody in this room that we are living in a moment, politically and otherwise, where there is a concerted effort to otherize our community and so many communities, and to make a lot of folks feel like we do not belong in the spaces that we exist in and the space that we take up. And so my intention here today is to really drive home this message of belonging and the importance of feeling that we belong in the spaces that we navigate. And two, I am here at 26 years old on this stage only because so many folks have fought for me to take up this space for generations and for generations. And I am in debt to them, and I am in debt to so many folks who've made today possible. And I want to talk about the importance in my journey, as well as I think in all of our journeys, of pulling each other up, right? And looking out for our own insofar as, I think often, when we are being otherized, it is really easy to feel alone. And it's really easy to not see anybody ahead of us or above us who has the capacity to pull us up. And so when and if we are in the positions that we can, I think we must. And I am so grateful that folks had done that with me to allow my journey to be possible. So now I'm going to tell you a little bit about me. Who am I? So I'm Ziad. I use he, him pronouns. My long story short is I grew up in Princeton, New Jersey, which I consider to be the greatest town on earth. And I grew up in Princeton, New Jersey as a presumptuous, loud, obnoxious little kid. And grew up in an American Muslim Bangladeshi household, and I was incredibly fortunate to grow up tremendously privileged insofar as never needing to want for anything. And I grew up with a mom who told me from a very young age that I could be whatever I wanted to be, that loved me and loved us so much that I believed her. I was delusional enough to believe her, that I could be whatever I wanted to be. And I traversed the world at a very young age with that sense of gumption and perhaps arrogance and perhaps presumptuousness. And as I navigated the world, as a young American Muslim, Bangladeshi American, the ways in which I was received was very different than the ways in which I grew up in a household of all girls. My parents were separate when I was young, and so it was my mom and my two sisters and I primarily, and I am very conscious of the fact that the way in which the world received me was very different to my sisters. My older sister, brighter than I, smarter than I, we walked into many of the same rooms, and my confidence was met with affirmation that I should be president one day. And her confidence was met with a real retaliation, telling her to be smaller and quieter if she wanted to be successful. And I am hyper-conscious of the ways that my unique privileges allowed me to take up the space that I have in my journey. And it's important to me that I start my journey and story there. In that, I grew up in a loving household with access to education and infrastructure and resources, and in that I was affirmed in my ability and agency to use my own voice from a very young age. That said, of course, I grew up in a moment in American history where it was not always the easiest to be American Muslim or a person of color or Asian American, and where a lot of folks were often incredulous as to my belief system, as to me identifying as Muslim so loudly and publicly, as to how much latitude I should get to be as loud as I wanted to be. And I, again, was presumptuous enough to not care too much, and kept on being loud, despite perhaps many moments throughout my journey of folks seeking, right, to maybe perhaps otherize me in different ways. But a pivotal moment for me in my upbringing and journey was I grew up at an all-boys Catholic school. And I grew up in a household of all girls, as I mentioned. And what that meant, functionally speaking, was growing up, I had no real conception of boys' things and girls' things. At home, my sisters were playing Barbies, I was playing Barbies. Everything was a girl's thing, right? And at school, theater, sports, it was all boys' things, because it was only boys. And I switched schools to a co-ed secular school when I was in 7th grade. And it dramatically changed the way that I looked at the world insofar as at that school, girls sat on one side and boys sat on another side. And there was this expectation that the only things that boys were allowed to wear were free graphic t-shirts they got places and salmon-colored shorts. And that all the boys were allowed to talk about were girls in sports. And I was like, really? Like, this is the best we can do? And I became obsessed with this question as to, are we separating ourselves out into these in-group, out-groups out of malice or out of ignorance? Where is this coming from? And so when I was graduating from middle school, I ended up starting a nonprofit called Redefy, a by teens for teens social justice advocacy group, whereby we created online campaigns, as well as created a network of clubs and chapters and a platform by which diverse young people from around the world could tell their stories as it relates to dealing with stereotypes, current events, and identity. I might be aging myself here, and I think there are at least some folks in the audience who are younger than me, because I know some of my colleagues are here who are. At the time that we launched Redefy, it was not Snapchat that we were launching on. It was Skype and Ask FM were the platforms of choice in our ecosystems, and perhaps some other social platforms that I won't name in this in this venue. But we launched when I was, sort of starting high school, and was met with this reception of so many young people from around the world saying, we've been waiting for this. That our schools, especially at that time, this was 2013, were really averse to talking about identity, stereotypes, current events, and social media at that time was far less politicized than today. And what that meant was we were not in the era of infographic activism, right? We were in the era of, for the most part, using social media to primarily connect with friends. And here we were using it for explicitly political purposes, to create community, to create agency around talking about this notion that at present, we are asked to go to school, we are asked to perform on the field, irrespective of what we've seen on the news about how communities and people who look like us might have been brutalized, discriminated against, or otherized in such perverse ways. We are expected to check our baggage, our identity at the door in professional and school environments with no regard for the fact that that is impossible for so many of us. That, of course, our homelands, our people, impact the way that we live and impact the way that we feel, and therefore the way that we perform. And so we created a platform to talk about that, and it ended up being much more resonant than I could have imagined. And people started to ask a lot of really hard questions of me, like, who am I to start this? What authority did I have? And I think that's a really important part of what I want to talk about today insofar as this notion of audacity. When I think about my journey, I think a lot of things that I've done have been slightly audacious, and that has been born on a bedrock of privilege. But it's also been born on a bedrock of being sort of somewhat antithetical to the Asian values that I think a lot of us are bred with. Right? I was certainly raised by my parents to not. While my mom said you can be whatever you want it to be, she had a clear vision of what she wanted me to be, and that was not to do this. And I was definitely raised to believe that the way to get ahead was keep your head down, do really well in school, don't shake the boat too much, and you'll be fine. You'll be more than fine. And my family was certainly nervous as I started to get more and more political, as I started to get louder and louder. They wanted me to be confident as it related to my academic endeavors, as it related to being in school government and things of the norm insofar as how a young person should self-actualize. But this was obviously a little bit more of off the beaten path. But I had the audacity to say I wanted to, and so I did. But then, fairly, a lot of folks asked me, well, who are you to do this? What authority do you have? And the answer is I didn't have any authority. I just believed that I wanted to, and I could, so I did. And I only came to even somewhat, maybe marginally, earn any authority through virtue of doing. We know in the world at present that male applicants for jobs and female applicants for jobs, when they look at a list of criterion for a job application, and a man might only see themselves reflected in half of them, will be like, I'm gonna apply. And a woman will look and see like 90% that they apply to and be like, I'm not qualified. I was the man who was like, I'm qualified, I had no business doing what I was doing, but I thought that I could, and so I did, and then hopefully, therefore, became somewhat qualified. But anyways, started this nonprofit, started a platform, started to gain traction, and somehow found myself eating dinner with President Obama at age 16 years old, and finding myself in rooms that I did not know existed, being invited into spaces that I was not aware of, to be the youth voice, to be the American Muslim voice in a lot of these rooms. And I looked around at many of these rooms, and the conversations were explicitly for the purpose. I was on a round table about like discrimination of Asian Americans in high schools, and I was one of like 4 Asian Americans in high school in a room of 100 people, right? And I was like, how can this be the case, that these conversations that are about us do not include us? And so my junior year of high school, I founded a company sort of informed by a lot of those experiences called Juve Consulting, which ended up becoming what Refinery 29 called the largest and most popular Gen Z agency, working with clients to help them better understand and connect with diverse young audiences, born out of this belief that if we're having a conversation about any group of people, that group of people ought to be centered in the conversation always and leading that conversation. And that ought to be true when we're talking about Asian Americans, that ought to be true when we're talking about Gen Zers, that ought to be true when we're talking about any and all communities. And too often, that is not the case. Too often in marketing and business and advertising, we throw around words like authenticity and make it feel like an impossibility. In my view, authenticity is the easiest thing in the world. Things feel authentic when they are authentic, and things feel forced when they are forced. When a room full of people who look nothing like the community that's trying to be served make a decision about that community, it's going to feel forced because it is forced. When a room full of people who understand because they are from that community make a decision about that community, it's going to feel authentic because it is authentic. What we have in business, what we have in marketing, we have in advertising often today is a conundrum where people are asking to be authentic, but they're not actually meaning what they say. They're asking instead, how do I seem authentic? You can't seem authentic. You can only be authentic. It's intrinsic to the word and the definition of it. And so we're often asking the wrong question altogether. And so in understanding and in sort of grappling with that tension in my experience as a nonprofit founder and finding myself in a lot of rooms of folks whose explicit jobs were to create programs for young people who did not actually embed the voices of any young people in the creation of said programs, I was like, this cannot be the best that we can do. And in that experience, I think a lot of people expect me to have felt imposter syndrome in walking into a lot of those rooms. To the contrary, I did not. And I know that might not be broadly relatable to this room. I know that a lot of us are sort of bred to feel imposter in a lot of the spaces and places that we are in. When I was in those rooms, as the 16-year-old that I was, or 17 or 18, no part of me walked into those rooms and said, I do not belong. I looked around the room and I said, these are the people in charge? And I said, not I don't belong, but so many more of us belong. It is not the case that in my experience, that in being different or knowing less or having less polish and a lot of the folks in those rooms, that my takeaway was, I am not qualified to be here. My takeaway was, their work will be just so much better if more of us with different perspectives are in this room too. Because of course, there are many people in those rooms who inspired me, who taught me things about myself, about the world. And I'd hope that my perspective also taught them about the world, that they were missing by not having viewpoints like mine in that space prior. And so fundamentally, my work comes from a place of believing that I think none of us ought to have imposter syndrome. We all ought to take the approach that it's not that we don't belong, it's that so many more of us belong. That feeling of not belonging is only contingent on generations and decades of policymaking that have made us feel like we don't belong because we are such a rarity in the spaces that we navigate. So our feeling of not belonging is not an indictment of self, it's an indictment of system. It's an indictment of a system that doesn't want us to feel welcome. And so my feeling is that we ought to take that feeling and discomfort and say, no, I am born to be here, and all of us are born to be here. We need more of our voices at every one of these conversations. And so started a little company, small little side project, I was busy with student government and Model UN and college applications and, trying to have friends and maybe date and, do the things that a person's supposed to do as a high schooler, and never thought in my wildest dreams that this work, that this company would become my life. It's important to me that I underscore the role that Model UN played in my journey. I don't know if anyone in this room did Model UN. Is there any Model UNers? Yeah, I see at least a few hands. Love it. Shout out my besties. Model UN, for those unfamiliar, sort of like debate, an activity that lots of kids do in high school, college, where we simulate the United Nations, take on the persona of various countries, and engage in pseudo-intellectual debate. I did Model UN starting in 9th grade, and I never won. I lost every time. I studied the hardest, I tried to say every word perfectly, I never won. And Model UN, unlike debate or mock trial, importantly, there's no rubric. So my experience in Model UN changed the first time I ever judged, because I had participated the first 2 years, and I sort of was a judge for the first time, like the end of sophomore year. And I realized, wow, I had been taught my whole life that there are rules that the world is playing by, that the harder you work, the better your outcomes are. And what I realized in being a chair is I couldn't tell you what any of the students had said in any of their speeches. Right? I didn't know who championed what policy that was actually true of that country. I was deciding based on vibe, right? Me and a bunch of high school students were who were half paying attention, texting each other the whole time on our laptops. At the end of the 4 days, we're like, I liked him. She was smart. And that's how you won. And it was a really important learning for me, as I think, as cringy as it sounds, I think Model UN is a really important corollary for the real world. There is no rubric. There are just people who are half paying attention, who are deciding a lot of things based on vibes. And disproportionately, people are attracted to vibes that affirm their existing sense of the world. And so what that means is that disproportionately, people are pulling up their own. People are looking out for people who share their viewpoints, who share their backgrounds, because it makes them feel comfortable. And when you're only half paying attention, those are the people that you gravitated towards. And so that was really structurally important to me, because then I sort of was like, oh, wow, this is a light bulb moment. And I changed my perspective on Model UN in a few ways. One, I stopped going in with my explicit intention being to win. Because once I realized that the system itself was rigged against me, I was like, this can't be my goal. The goal has to be something bigger and less arbitrary. So my goal was, in every conference, my goal was to come away with one real best friend. Because they can't take that away from me. They can decide that they didn't like my vibe, but I can decide that weekend was still worth it because I had something that existed far beyond. Whether I got into the college or got the gavel or didn't get the gavel, I had a friend who would weather storms with me. And secondly, I started letting my voice crack. I stopped preparing. I just started winging it. I didn't prepare for this speech at all. I had no idea what I was going to say until I got up here. And that is not the Asian mindset always. But that and another experience where I wrote a 10-page speech and memorized it and lost my place halfway through for 30 seconds traumatized me to the extent that I no longer prepare for anything, for better and for worse. And I know that that can feel so nerve-wracking, right? But I think about how often so many of the folks in charge are winging everything that they do while asking of us to perfect everything that we do. And when you are trying to perfect, there is no time to do the amount of things that people who are winging are doing. Because you're spending all of your time just engaged in preparation and anxiety and insecurity. And so by drastically reducing my anxiety and preparation and insecurity and just saying, I'm going to be me, I started winning. And it really changed my view of the world. And so I started this business. as a small little side project. And it ended up becoming my whole life as this was 2016 when I started my business. Big year for the world. And as more and more people started to, when I started the business as a Gen Z marketing agency, most people still thought of us as millennials. Like the word and vernacular around Gen Z wasn't even really quite yet built out in the way that it is today. People started to really care about Gen Z and start to lean in. And our SEO was good because we were early movers, and the business started to grow because hopefully we did good work, and ended up going to college and hiring full-time employees while I was a full-time student and juggling both full-time and going back and forth. And I don't necessarily recommend it, but I did it. And got to spend a lot of time, again, in places and spaces that I did not know existed. And that was made possible because of people like Christina and Bernice, who would meet me when I was 17 and see me speak or put me on a panel and say, I want to invite you into more spaces and more rooms. And disproportionately, those people were women, those people were people of color, those people were queer folks. Whether or not they had the same identities as me, people who understood what it felt like to be spoken about but not spoken to. People who understood what it felt like to be unheard, and people who understood what it felt like for marketers to get up here and present white papers about their communities with no consultation with those communities. And I owe everything that I am to the tremendous kindness that folks have paid me that I did not deserve, of inviting me into rooms and spaces and championing me at a very young age. And so throughout my time at college, the business started to really grow, and the pandemic hit when I was a junior in college. And that was a real boon for our business, and that it was much easier for me to switch between tabs on my computer than be in 4 cities per week while being a student, and sometimes having to be in 2 Zoom calls at the same time, 1 for work and 1 for class. But we did it, and grew organically as people had to pivot into short-form video, had to pivot into purpose, had to pivot to the growing power of Gen Z, both commercially, culturally, and otherwise. And I, again, never thought when I started this as a junior in high school this would be my full-time job, that I'd have full-time employees, but we hired our first adult when I was a junior in college with kids, which was crazy. It's the best decision I've ever made. Amazing Korean American. And when Ed came on, I just started asking myself questions. This guy took a pay cut to come work for me. Like, what is his equity worth? What journey are we on? What is the end point? Because really, part of the success of Juve Consulting was that we got to innovate absent of real risk. Before I had Ed and had an employee with kids, like, so what if we failed? We were in college, had degrees to fall back on, and the risk wasn't that high, and suddenly there was real risk. And so I had to ask ourselves, like, this isn't just like a haha, we're just, doing this for shits and gigs. This is a business. And so we start to talk about, well, how do we, if our goal as a business is to empower as many diverse young people as possible, is to change the way that the industry thinks about engaging with community, period. How do we do that at scale? And so we started to have serious conversations around investment and acquisition, and ultimately, I graduated from college in 2021. I focused my research on social media's impact on politics, which I'm happy to talk about later. But sort of in that time period that I graduated, I was an adult, had to start thinking about where we were going. And so we sort of went through that process, and ultimately, a year ago, United Talent Agency, UTA, acquired my business. So UTA acquired Juve Consulting in March of 2024, rebranding us as the next-gen practice of UTA, where we continue to do our work with clients, helping them connect with culture. And a big part of what we do is also ZCON, which is our conference, not so unlike this one, which is about bringing community together. And it's the first major conference with only Gen Z speakers. The idea being that I've been so lucky and so fortunate that me and my team have been the chosen Gen Zers on stages at Cannes Lion, on stages at VidCon, at stages at Council on Foreign Relations, on the biggest stages in the world. But still, so often, we go to these moments, advertising week, whatever it might be, and there are panels that are brilliant and wonderful and good about Gen Z that don't include enough Gen Z voices. And now we're grateful that we get to partner with many of those same conferences to change that, but also that we get to create our own on our own terms. And so ZCON is about this notion of belonging, that you can only feel belonging so much in spaces that were never made to be yours. We talk all the time about this notion of the table at Juve. That I'm not interested in Gen Z having a seat at the table as the folding chair in the corner, metaphorically or literally taking notes. I'm interested in Gen Z having a substantive seat at the table. And what that looks like is, metaphorically at this table, I want us to, 1, embrace a mindset that the table indeed can and must get bigger. 2, understand that the chairs must be comfortable for folks, and that sometimes looks like constructing different chairs for different people. And 3, that the food has to be seasoned. And for too long, it has not been. And I'm really obsessed with that question around what does it look like to not just ask for new tables, to not just ask for new chairs at an existing table, but to instead build our own. And so ZCON for us is building our own. It is recess instead of a break, and prom instead of a party, and a day of action with nonprofit partners instead of just talking about Gen Z's values, living them. It is platforming progressive, diverse change makers, celebrities, creators, CEOs who are representative of the myriad of experiences that Gen Z espouses and is living and inhabiting day in and day out, and creating vibrant intergenerational community with CMOs, hula hooping next to a 19-year-old activist in a way and in a format that I had not seen myself prior, and in a way that hopefully radically allows people to understand that you do not have to check your baggage, your identity at the door, but instead we embrace you with your baggage, your identity, your trauma through that door. And I don't know that we always get it right, but that has certainly always been our ambition. And we've been able to scale ZCON and bring it to New York, to LA, to Cannes Lion. We've gotten to partner with folks like Snapchat ourselves to make things like ZCON come to life, which we're tremendously grateful for. And now, a year in, I am the head of Next Gen at UTA, where I continue to do our work leading ZCON. And I continue to hopefully use my voice wherever and however I can to hopefully push the envelope, to hopefully make more of us feel that we can be included and celebrated. And it is not lost on me that we are living in a moment where there is a concerted effort to make us scared to use our voices. Whether that be in regards to the tremendous loss of human life all around this world that is often a footnote in Western media when it pertains to Eastern lives, or whether that's in regards to believing and advocating that there ought to be diverse voices within corporate spaces that make our work better, and that it is our moral responsibility to ensure that all communities have equal access to said table. In both of these issues, on both of these topics, we are in a real moment of stifling our voices. And it is so important to me that as a person of privilege, that I continue to speak out about that which impacts those in this room and that which impacts folks who are far less privileged than those in this room. That there is a certain privilege that any of us have in even being here in relative safety and comfort and community with each other. And it is my hope that this feeling of belonging that I feel in this room, that we can scale, that we can work to achieve for more of us and work to achieve a world where we are pulling each other up and celebrating each other and hopefully creating a table that, inshallah, God willing, is comfortable and seasoned for all of us. But that's me and my little talk. Hopefully that was interesting in some way, shape, or form. But now I'm going to be doing a little fireside with Christina and then taking questions from you all. But yeah, hopefully we can keep a fun little conversation going.
One more round for Ziad. That was great. Well, thanks for the introduction. I'm Christina, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. Ziad, you had such an inspiring talk. It's amazing what you have been doing. You built Juve Consulting when you were a teenager. Now you're head of Next Gen at UTA. Tell us a little bit more about the mindset you had, what qualities you think are important to take that ambition and turn it into this sustainable impact.
Like maybe this is a bad answer, but I'm in general, maybe it's a little contrarian in this room, like many young people, have a lot of systemic critique of the way that capitalism operates in today's world. I say that to say that at no point in my journey with Juve Consulting was my ambition necessarily predicated on commercial success at the get. It was predicated on a real insight and pain point that I felt. I was mad that I was in a youth roundtable and there was a 40-year-old youth expert. And I was like, oh, sorry, like I can do it better, right? And that's really where it came from. It was a place of conviction of, that's great that they have built that career, but so can I, right? If people are asking for Gen Z expertise, I tend to think Gen Zers are the best Gen Z experts. And so it came from a place of a pain point, of feeling like a lot of folks were talking about us, but not to us. And so it wasn't really about even ambition, it was about conviction. And I do a lot of like coaching and whatever on like public speaking, and people always ask me like, how do you be a better public speaker? And I'm like, you don't. Like, I don't want anyone to spend time being like, how do I say the right words at the right time? Do you believe what you are saying? We are all our best talkers when we want to convince our mom to let us go to that party, right? When we believe with conviction what we are saying and that we want to convince the other person of it. I think oftentimes we have been raised and taught that as Asian Americans, as contrarian thinkers, we ought not to be so loud about our convictions. We ought to instead cosplay as whatever the mainstream opinion might be. And I think that my mindset was one of, this is what I believe. Of course, as time went on, I had to like professionalize as CEO and like make certain business decisions around like what our ambitions and goals were. And I don't want to undermine the importance of that as it pertains to commercial success. But I think building a culture around conviction was our recipe for success, because I have the same leadership team today that I've had for the last 5-6 years. We believe in what we are doing and we believe in each other. And I always say the most important thing as it pertains to me being a leader is a culture of mutual benefit of the doubt. If we don't believe that we are both here for good reasons, moving towards the same goal, then we have nothing. And I'm not interested in participating in any of it. Because if we're constantly going to be questioning each other's conviction, there's no conversation to be had, there's only undermining to be had. And I'm interested in having conversation, I'm interested in community building, I'm interested in conviction, I'm interested in hopefully charting a better path forward. And so I think that's the general mindset, and like maybe a bit of arrogance. Like, I think that I believed so badly that we could, that we did.
That's, I think, really,
Can you still hear me?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I think that's actually really important and interesting to say. It's about conviction, right? We've all been in places where we might not really truly believe in what's happening, and so that actually translates in how we're coming across.
Yeah.
Speaking of, I guess, conviction, which might kind of lead to the next question, I might have given the answer away. But you do use your voice really boldly on stages, in boardrooms, in media. For those of us who are still trying to find our voice or sharpen that and come across authentic, what advice do you have for us?
Look, I'm always really wary of giving advice in general. Just because it worked for me does not mean it necessarily worked for you, because of my intersecting privileges and disadvantages that might differ from your own, and because of my contextual reality, and because times in the world have changed and this political moment is very different than that political moment. Let me tell you, selling my business would have been a very different conversation in this political moment than a year ago, right? And so I'm always weary of giving advice. That said, I think it's important to note that I don't see myself as using my voice boldly. Oftentimes I am told that I do, or courageously. Courage has to cost something. I don't think I'm that courageous because I don't know what it's costed me. For the most part, I've actually, to the contrary, profited off of it, right? And I think oftentimes as marketers, we're quick to be like, we're so courageous, we're so bold, like we're changing the world. Are we? Like, I don't know that we are. I think that oftentimes we are just doing our jobs, and that's okay. And sometimes we're really good at doing our jobs, and I like to think I am, right? But from a place of using my voice boldly, like what have I lost? What have I risked? Is it actually bold, or is it just unconventional, right? Because I don't know that it's that courageous, to be honest, especially in a world where I have so much relative privilege that even if, in a worst case scenario, I lose my job, people are mean to me on the internet, whatever it is, like relative to the average person in the world, like I'm still thriving, right? Like I have so much that I have to be lucky for that how could I not use my voice, right? How could I not be loud when so many don't, like I'm obviously, as any Gen Zer in this room will know, like I do not subscribe to an ideology of like giving voice to the voiceless. Like everybody has a voice, not everybody has a microphone, right? And so if I'm lucky enough to have a microphone, damn right I'm gonna use it, and damn right I'm gonna pass it to the next person, and the next person, and the next person, right? And anybody who should be so lucky as to have a microphone ought to think about how do I ensure that my access to the microphone makes it better or easier for the person after me? How do I make sure that I am not the last? I'm not interested in being the first of anything. I'm interested in ensuring I'm not the last of everything, right? And so I think that the least we can do is be loud when we have a microphone and keep passing it on. And thank you for passing this mic to me, because I think that's what you've done. That's what Bernice has done, right? Like that's what this room is all about, is giving people who historically maybe have not had microphones and then saying, let's pass it on to the next, let's pass it on to the next. And so for me, like, people often want me to be like the Gen Z, I'm so hopeful. Like, I'm not. Sorry, I'm not that hopeful. But my work doesn't come from a place of believing that I'm optimizing for hope. It comes from a place of believing that I have a moral responsibility to be effective. I have a moral responsibility to give a damn and to show up for my values. And so the question for me is not like, am I hopeful? Like, what do I hope to do with my voice? Like, am I trying to be bold? My question is, the world is on fire. If I'm not saying and sounding the fire alarm, I'm letting people burn. Like, that is what compels me to use my voice.
We have time for one more question.
Yeah.
If there was one actionable thing that you could leave our audience with about how they can start building their own tables or, move closer to their goals, what would that be?
Look, again, I don't know that I'm always the best person for advice. And maybe I'm wrong about a lot of things that I believe and say. But what I can say is when I started Redefy, the nonprofit, it wasn't a nonprofit. It was a social media handle. It was a WordPress website. It was 5 of me and my friends at my friend's kitchen table. I think sometimes you find yourself at a beautiful conference like this at Snapchat headquarters, and you find yourself looking at ZCON and you don't see the 8 years before that looked nothing like that. Of all that went through to get there, the table often looks like the one that you're already at. It doesn't look like necessarily this glamorous, corporate, right, built out table. It looks like the lunch table you're already at with your friends and inviting more people to sit at that one. I didn't register to be a 501c3 until many years later. I didn't start a company until many years later. I didn't sell that company until many years later, right? I think oftentimes entrepreneurship is glamorized and we sell that it's like, we started in this super comfy chair. Like, no, I didn't. No, I didn't. Let me tell you. The first talks I gave looked nothing like this one, right? And I think having that frame of reference of the table that I'm currently at can be the table where I build is, I think, a helpful frame of reference. And I am so lucky and so privileged that my table allowed me to get to where I am so much faster than it would for the average person. And I'm deeply conscious of that reality and deeply committed to creating a world that is more equal such that more people's tables get them to where they ought to go as quick, if not quicker than I. But at least as it pertains to this room, we all have a table. What are we doing with it, and how are we pulling up more chairs?
Yeah, I think that's really helpful because a lot of us see the glamorized like end version of like, I got this job, I created this company, I'm speaking on this podcast, but we often miss what happened and all the work that is happening behind the scenes to get up to that point. I want to open up the floor to the audience because I'm sure we might have questions for Ziad. There's mics in the middle if anybody has a question and wants to come up. Otherwise, I have more questions.
Well, one of the questions here is like, what would be one challenge? It'd be ask a question. Like, if I was in rooms of a lot of other demographics, they would have already asked many. Yeah, you.
That we're passing on. Oh, I'm so short.
And hi.
Hi. To hear your story, because we've been in the same space before, it's been so illuminating. I can't wait to like completely sequester you and drown you with questions next week.
That's very kind.
But I would be very curious because you're so bold because you feel compelled to get your points out. Can you share with us when you were actually nervous about doing that? And how did you overcome that?
Yeah. First of all, I want to say you and so many leaders like you have instilled in me the ability to be as loud as I am, right? And the space that you have fought for more Asians to take up the space in our industry is incredible and so important. I'm so grateful to you specifically, but also a broader network of folks that we both mutually share. And there have been many moments, as I'm sure many folks in this room can predict some of them. Look, politically right now, we are in a moment where I am personally scared. We are watching people be disappeared because of their convictions. Whether you agree with said convictions or not, that is a really scary reality that we are facing. I have been many times in my journey, especially as it relates to policy, very scared as to, am I saying the right words? What will be the risk of what I am saying? And will this mean, and it's worth noting that my company, Juve Consulting, we never raised outside capital. And so what that meant is I only had the money month in, month out that I got from my clients. And in 8 years, I never missed payroll, right? And so for me not to miss payroll is contingent on making sure my clients don't cancel my contracts. And of course, we live in a universe where if I say the wrong thing, that can mean that I lose clients. And that can mean that a team of majority people of color, majority women, many of whom from low-income backgrounds that have been very intentional about who I hire, no longer have access to their paycheck, and I don't have any other cash other than this cash. And so, of course, I've been petrified. But without getting too political, on a political issue that is ongoing right now in the world, I was reticent to speak out as it relates to what the consequence of speaking out could be for me, my team, the target it could put on all of our backs. And this was pre-acquisition. And my team challenged me and said, so are you saying that if Black Lives Matter was bad for business, you wouldn't have said it? And I said, point taken, and we posted the next day. And I was really scared of what it could mean for our business, of what it could mean for all of us. But I think because the way that we spoke out was so rooted in our convictions that were already so public, no one was ever under the impression that I or we are not on the side of embattled young people. Our whole position as a company has been that we exist to empower diverse young people. Therefore, it would make sense that we speak out when young people, whether being hurt by gun violence or whether being hurt by conflict, are being hurt, and to do so in a really compassionate way and governed by our values. And it wasn't as much of a problem as I would have maybe anticipated because I think it was so rooted in conviction. But look, every day right now, I ask myself, like, am I saying enough? Am I saying too much? And what is the risk of what I am saying, both to my business, to my family, to myself? And I don't know where I net out on all of those questions, but I do know that regardless of the risk to me, my family, my team, is so much less than the harm that other folks are already facing. And me feeling safe is not more important than someone else being safe. And I think it's really important that I sit with that, because if I don't, and I get complacent, and I get quiet, that's how we arrive at a world where so many folks are hurt, and continue to be hurt by systems that do not correct themselves because those that are within them stop being loud about how we can fix them. Are there other questions? Yeah, there was a question there.
You can just walk up to the mics in the middle and ask your question. Go ahead.
Oh, the lights. Short version of this question is, I think there's so much pain happening right now in the United States. It is shutting down conversations about everything. The environment, politics, our products that we're trying to promote.
Yeah.
How do we fight this and keep the conversations going so that we can keep learning and changing?
Yeah. I've been thinking a lot about this question. I like to think of myself as a community builder. I like to think of myself as somebody who believes in the power of conversation. And while I have a very clear politics and I'm very public about my politics, one thing that I think is really important as it relates to this conversation is I differ from the majority of Gen Z in that Gen Z has often taken an approach that when they see people who post something that they disagree with, it's block or unfollow. Which I get, but I would never do. And why I would never do that is, how do we expect foreign diplomats of folks who are sworn enemies to negotiate things that we're advocating for if we can't talk to our friends who have different opinions than us on the same topic? If we can't have this conversation, how can they have this conversation? And if we're advocating for them to have some conclusions about this conversation, we better be able to have it. I am really outcome-oriented in how I think of the world. And so I'm interested not in what makes me feel good, but what gets us to a more good outcome. To me, the good outcome is basically everything in the world changing. And for that to happen, we have to convince people it needs to change. And so I think that what that looks like is, when we talk about like corporate America, oftentimes we're really allergic to having hard conversations at the office. In my workplace, and my team, we have them openly and loudly with each other. We do not agree on everything. And we talk about that at work. I think that's really important. And I think it's really important that we model that as leaders, that we hold nuance, that we're open to conversation, that we're willing to be challenged. Because I think at present what you have is a lot of people rage quitting conversation, and that doesn't actually solve any of our problems. And I understand why we're rage quitting, because trust me, like, I am seething with anger. But you do attract more bees with honey, right? And I think right now we need a world of a lot more sweetness, and that doesn't mean, like, you can be kind and still disagree. And I think it's really important that we make that really clear. And I think right now the way that the internet has transpired makes it seem that any disagreement is inherently inflammatory. I think disagreement is actually really constructive. And so we have to figure out ways digitally and physically that we can interface with each other in a place of disagreement that ultimately allows us to arrive at some more mutual understanding, even if it means we're still disagreeing. We better understand the other position such that hopefully we can actually work together towards a solution.
Thank you.
Of course.
Last question. We have like a minute left.
Sorry, I'm so verbose.
Oh.
Thank you. It was really insightful to hear you speak today.
Thank you.
I had a question. I think you touched upon this, but having achieved so much at this age, do you feel a sense of imposter syndrome sometimes kicking in? And if yes, how do you deal with it?
No, I feel a sense of tired syndrome. I feel, no, I don't, frankly. I am really grateful for the journey that I have had. I have the most extraordinary team and community that has allowed me to achieve what I have. And I, again, stand on the shoulders of so many. It is not my accomplishments, it is ours. And I mean that also and it's important that I say this, I mean that structurally too, right? We were a company that gave everybody equity in the company, right? Like this was about wealth creation for all of us, right? Yeah. But as it relates to imposter syndrome now, like obviously, yeah, I'm 26. I'm in a lot of rooms of people who are a lot older than 26. I often feel other than, I often feel different from, I often feel like maybe they don't want to be my bestie. But I'm really grateful for the folks that do want to be my bestie and that make me feel safe and comfortable in those spaces. And I am so hyper aware of how rare it is to be in my seat. To be at a company as large as UTA at 26 years old, to run a division, to have the microphones that I have access to be in the spaces that I am in. My attention is not, again, I do not belong. My attention is how do I make sure so many more of us belong? How do I elevate more people in other departments who are young as young leaders? How do I include more voices into the stages and spaces that I'm in? How do I pull in more voices? Like that is my agenda. Because there are two ways to look at it, right? One is like, I'm the only young person. I'm gonna be really like sad and alone in the corner, or I'm gonna fight like hell so that I'm not the only young person. And I'm gonna bring my friends here with me. And so when I was at Possible last week in Miami, we curated 3 sessions with Possible, and we plugged our amazing Gen Z creator friends on panels with us, and I had the best week with them. And so I wasn't alone in those rooms and spaces. Right. And I fight to bring my team into every place that I go. My team is the most amazing, dynamic, young, diverse people in the world. And so, like, I'm never alone because I've built a community around me, the folks that I'm pulling up and pulling with into the spaces that I'm at. And I'm really lucky that I'm in a position where I can do that. And there was a lot of fighting tooth and nail to get to that position. But it's made my journey so much more worthwhile because I have that same, to close, right, the same agenda today that I did in Model UN, which is in every room, in every space, am I bringing a bestie and am I making a bestie? Yeah. And if I am, what do I have to be an imposter about? Because I'm here with my friends.
That's interesting. Thank you.
Of course.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, my friend.
Oh, no, thank you.
I so appreciate you. Thank you, Christina. Thank you, Bernice. Thank you, Asians in advertising. Love being Asian. Love you all. Thank you.